You're no longer part of this family." My father's voice rang out across the marble ballroom, loud enough that the orchestra faltered mid-note. Every head turned toward us. Every conversation stopped. I stood there in my borrowed suit, feeling the weight of 300 pairs of eyes pressing down on me like a physical thing. This was it, the moment I had been dreading my entire life, the moment my family finally decided I wasn't worth pretending to tolerate anymore. Welcome to Moonlit Stories. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Today's story is about the Omega nobody wanted and the king who claimed him anyway. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments below. Now, let's begin. The Royal Spring Ball was supposed to be my last chance. That's what my father had said 3 days ago when he'd thrown the invitation at my chest. The king himself is attending. Every noble family in the kingdom will be there. This is your final opportunity to make yourself useful to this family, Elliot. Find an alpha to bond with or don't bother coming home. I was 24 years old. I'd been trying to make myself useful my entire life. It had never been enough. My family was minor nobility, barely clinging to relevance through my father's shipping business and my older brother's strategic marriage into the Westmore family. I was the youngest of 3 sons, an Omega in a family that had produced alphas for 6 generations before me. My father called me a genetic aberration. My brothers called me worse things when father wasn't listening. My mother had died giving birth to me, which meant I had spent my entire life being blamed for her absence. She would have been so disappointed in you, father liked to say, when he'd had too much wine. She deserved better than to die for an Omega. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight I was supposed to prove I had value. I'd spent the last 3 days preparing. I'd practiced conversation topics. I'd memorized the names and lineages of every eligible alpha attending. I'd even borrowed a decent suit from a cousin who pretended not to hate me. The suit was too big in the shoulders and too long in the sleeves, but it was better than anything I owned. I'd arrived at the palace with my family, walking 3 steps behind my father and brothers, trying to make myself invisible until the right moment. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with scenes of ancient battles. The walls were covered in tapestries showing the kingdom's history in gold and crimson thread. The crowd was a sea of silk and jewels, everyone dressed in their finest, everyone competing to be noticed by the king. I had seen King Alexander from a distance once, 2 years ago during the Victory Day parade. Even from far away, he had been imposing. Tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of confidence that came from absolute power. He was 35, unmarried, and according to rumors, utterly disinterested in bonding. Every Omega and Beta in the kingdom had tried to catch his attention at some point. None had succeeded. I wasn't trying to catch the king's attention. I knew better than that. I was looking for someone reasonable, someone minor enough to consider an Omega from a struggling family. Someone who might overlook my family's disdain if it meant securing a bond. I'd spent the first hour of the ball standing near the refreshment table, trying to appear approachable while avoiding my brother's mocking glances from across the room. I'd started 3 conversations. All 3 had ended with the alpha in question finding an excuse to walk away within 60 seconds. By the second hour, I was standing alone near a marble pillar, fighting the urge to leave. My Omega instincts were screaming at me. Too many alphas in one space, too many dominant scents mixing together. My scent blockers were working overtime, but I could still feel my distress starting to leak through. The 3rd hour was when everything fell apart. My brother Thomas found me first. He was drunk, his face flushed with wine and cruelty. "Well, well, still here, little Omega? I thought you'd have found some desperate alpha by now. Surely someone in this room is drunk enough to take pity on you." I kept my eyes down, submissive, non-threatening. "I'm trying, Thomas. Father said I should stay until midnight. Father's patience is exhausted, Elliot." His voice was loud now, attracting attention. Mine too, honestly. We're all tired of pretending you're part of this family when we all know you're just mother's ghost haunting us. My chest tightened. People were starting to stare. "Thomas, please. Not here. Not here." He laughed, that sharp, performative laugh I'd heard my entire life. "Where then, Elliot? Where is it acceptable to address the family embarrassment? Should we wait until we're home so you can cry in private again?" My other brother Marcus appeared from the crowd. He'd always been the crueler of the two, always known exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. Found yourself a mate yet, Elliot? No. Shocking. Absolutely shocking that nobody wants an Omega whose own family can barely stand to look at him. The circle around us was growing, nobles pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. I could feel my face burning, my hands shaking. Please, I whispered, please don't do this. Don't do what? Tell the truth? Marcus moved closer. You're weak. You're useless. You've cost this family a fortune in scent blockers and heat suppressants and doctors trying to figure out what's wrong with you. And for what? So you can stand here at the king's ball, pathetic and unwanted, embarrassing us one final time. Father appeared then. I had hoped he might intervene, might tell my brothers to stop. Instead, he looked at me with cold assessment in his eyes, and I knew. I knew before he even opened his mouth. Enough. Father's voice was quiet, but it carried. This has gone on long enough. I won't waste another evening watching him fail to secure even the most desperate alliance. Won't waste another coin on his suppressants and medical bills. Won't waste another moment of this family's time on a son who contributes nothing. Father, I started. My voice came out broken. Please. I've tried. I'm trying. You've tried for 24 years, Elliot. You've failed for 24 years. He turned to address the growing crowd, making sure his voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. Let it be known that as of this moment, Elliot is no longer a member of the Ashford family. He is disowned, disinherited, no longer under our protection or authority. Whatever debts he incurs, whatever shame he brings, it is no reflection on the Ashford name. The ballroom went completely silent. Even the orchestra had stopped playing. 300 people stared at us, at me, at the Omega being publicly cast out by his own family. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This was happening. This was really happening. Father, please, I'll do better. I'll find someone tonight, I swear. I'll make myself useful. You've had your entire life to make yourself useful. His voice was flat, final. You failed. Now face the consequences of your failure. Leave this ballroom. Leave this city if you have any sense. The Ashford family is done with you. My brothers were smiling. Actually smiling. The crowd around us whispered furiously. But some looked scandalized. Most looked fascinated. Entertainment at the king's ball. A real-life family drama playing out in front of them. I looked around desperately, looking for someone who might intervene, someone who might object. No one met my eyes. No one wanted to be associated with the Omega being publicly discarded. I felt something in my chest crack. Not my heart. That had been breaking slowly for years. This was something deeper. Some final thread of hope snapping. I turned to walk away, to leave, to disappear before the humiliation killed me. My legs wouldn't cooperate. They shook violently. I took one step, then another. On the third step, my knees buckled. I was going to fall, going to collapse in front of everyone, going to add physical weakness to my list of failures. Strong hands caught me before I hit the marble floor. The scent hit me first. Pine and winter frost and something darker underneath. Something that spoke of power and authority so absolute it made my Omega instincts stand at attention. I looked up. The Alpha King was holding me. King Alexander himself had crossed the entire ballroom to catch me. His arms were wrapped around me, supporting my weight like I was something precious instead of something discarded. His face was inches from mine. Sharp features, dark hair, ice blue eyes that held an intensity that stole my breath. He was more imposing up close than I could have imagined. He looked at me with those ice blue eyes and said, "Mine." The word echoed through the silent ballroom. Mine. Not a question, a declaration, a claim. The entire world stopped. My father's face went white. My brothers looked like they'd been struck. The crowd collectively gasped. The Alpha King was claiming me, claiming the Omega who'd just been publicly disowned, claiming damaged goods. The king's eyes never left mine. "Are you hurt?" His voice was surprisingly gentle given the authority it carried. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what was happening. He helped me stand, keeping one arm around my waist, keeping me steady. Then he turned to face my father and brothers. The temperature in the ballroom dropped. "Lord Ashford," the king's voice was ice. Would you care to repeat what you just said about this Omega? My father looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Majesty, I believe you called him useless, weak, an embarrassment to your family. The king's arm tightened around me. Interesting, because I've been watching him all evening. He's shown more grace and dignity in 3 hours than your entire family has shown in a lifetime. My father's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. I've also been listening to your sons mock him, publicly humiliate him, treat him like he's disposable. The king looked at Thomas and Marcus. They both went pale. Tell me, Lord Ashford, by what authority do you disown a member of your family on my ballroom floor? My father swallowed hard, by rights of family, and you have no rights here. The king cut him off. This is my palace, my ballroom, my kingdom, and the Omega you just tried to discard? He's under my protection now. The silence was deafening. Father, I need you to understand something very clearly. The king's voice dropped lower, became more dangerous. I don't allow my subjects to be mistreated in my presence. Especially not Omegas, especially not ones who have done nothing to deserve such treatment. But, Your Majesty, Marcus started foolishly. He's mine, the king repeated. As of this moment, he is under royal protection. Any further insult to him is an insult to the crown. Is that understood? The crowd murmured. My family looked like they'd been slapped. The king looked down at me. What's your name? Elliot, I managed. My voice barely worked. Elliot Ashford. Number. His eyes held mine. Not Ashford. Not anymore. They forfeited that right when they threw you away. He raised his voice to address the crowd. Let it be known throughout this kingdom that Elliot, formerly of the Ashford family, is now under the direct protection of the crown. He resides in the royal palace. He answers only to me. Anyone who harms him, insults him, or attempts to use him for political gain will answer to me personally. Is that clear? The entire ballroom bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. The king looked back at my father. You're dismissed. Leave my sight before I decide that public humiliation is an offense worthy of imprisonment. My father fled, literally fled the ballroom with my brothers stumbling after him. The crowd parted for them like water. The king kept his arm around me. Can you walk? I think so. He didn't let go, just guided me out of the ballroom, through corridors I'd never seen, past guards who bowed as we passed, up stairs that seemed endless. Finally, we reached a set of massive doors, the king's private chambers. He brought me inside, settled me on a couch in front of a fireplace, poured me water from a crystal decanter, knelt in front of me to make sure I drank it. I'm going to ask you some questions. His voice was gentler now, away from the performance. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I need to understand what just happened down there. Okay, I whispered. How long has your family been treating you like that? My entire life, since the day I was born. And tonight? What was tonight supposed to be? My last chance. I was supposed to find an alpha to bond with. If I failed, they threatened to disown you. Yes. His jaw tightened. Do you have anywhere to go? Anyone who would take you in? I shook my head. I have 17 silver coins and the clothes I'm wearing. That's all I own. Everything else belongs to the family. Belonged to the family. The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You'll stay here. What? You'll stay here? In the palace? In quarters near mine where I can ensure you're safe. But nothing. He cut me off gently. I wasn't lying down there, Elliot. You're under my protection now. That's not a political statement or a temporary rescue. That's real. I don't understand. I looked at him desperately. Why would you do this? Why would the king help me? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. He sat back on his heels. I've been watching you since you arrived. Not just tonight. I remembered you from an event 2 years ago. You were standing in a corner trying to be invisible while your brothers entertained the crowd. I remembered thinking you looked like you were in pain. You remembered me? I was shocked. From 2 years ago? You're sent. He said it simply. Even through the blockers. Rain and something floral. Wisteria, I think. I've been looking for that scent every time there's a gathering. Tonight when you walked in, I knew immediately. I could barely focus on anything else. That doesn't make sense. Why would... Because I'm an alpha, Elliot. and you're an Omega. And the moment I caught your scent 2 years ago, something in me recognized something in you. I've been waiting to meet you properly ever since. But you're the king. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. His eyes held mine. I want you. I want the Omega who survived 24 years in a family that treated him like garbage. I want the one who kept trying even when it was clear he'd never succeed. I want the one whose scent makes me feel like I've been asleep my entire life and I'm finally waking up. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of dream or delusion or cruel joke. The king reached out slowly, gave me time to pull away, brushed his fingers along my jaw. You don't believe me. I don't understand this. You're the king. I'm nothing. You're not nothing. His voice was fierce. And I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that to you. But first, you're going to rest. You're going to eat something. You're going to let yourself process what happened tonight. And then tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. What comes next, whatever you want. He stood, offered his hand. But for tonight, you're safe. No one will hurt you here. No one will make you feel small. You're under my protection, and I don't break my promises. I took his hand, let him pull me to my feet. He led me to another room through a connecting door. A bedroom larger than my entire room at home had been. A bed that looked like clouds, windows overlooking the palace gardens. This is yours, the king said. For as long as you need it, for as long as you want it, I can send for anything you require. Clothes, books, whatever you need to be comfortable. I don't need anything. I don't even know why you're doing this. He turned back at the door. His expression was soft, almost vulnerable, because someone should have done it 24 years ago. Someone should have looked at you and seen what I see. Someone should have protected you. Since no one did, I will. He left before I could respond. Left me standing in a bedroom that was worth more than my family's entire house. Left me reeling from the most surreal night of my life. I sat on the edge of the bed, looked around at the impossible luxury, tried to process what had just happened. 3 hours ago, I'd been standing in a ballroom trying desperately to make myself useful. 2 hours ago, I'd been publicly humiliated and disowned by my family. 1 hour ago, I'd been caught by the Alpha King before I could fall. And now I was sitting in a royal bedroom being told I was wanted, protected, safe. None of it made sense. None of it felt real. I looked down at my hands, still shaking, still expecting someone to burst through the door and tell me this was a mistake, that the king had changed his mind, that I needed to leave immediately. No one came. I lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling, tried to convince myself I wasn't dreaming. I was still trying when exhaustion finally dragged me under. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life, a surreal transition from nightmare to something that felt dangerously close to a dream. The king, Alexander he insisted I call him when we were alone, was true to his word in ways I hadn't dared to hope for. I lived in quarters next to his, a suite of rooms that was larger than my family's entire 3rd floor. The bedroom had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the palace gardens. The sitting room had comfortable chairs positioned near a fireplace that was kept burning constantly. There was a private bathing room with hot water that never ran out and soaps that smelled like forest rain. I had access to the entire palace, though I rarely ventured far those first few days. The palace staff knew my name, bowed when they saw me, and asked if I needed anything with genuine concern in their voices. I was given clothes that actually fit my frame, tailored specifically for me in soft fabrics that didn't scratch or bind. The royal library was open to me, thousands of books I'd only dreamed of reading, and the food was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Fresh fruit at breakfast, meat that hadn't been salted to preserve it, bread that was still warm from the oven, desserts that tasted like clouds. I was introduced to the palace staff properly in those first days. The head steward, Edmund, who treated me with careful respect and made sure my rooms were always comfortable. The royal physician, Dr. Laurent, who examined me thoroughly and prescribed treatments for malnutrition I hadn't even known I was suffering from. The king's personal advisor, Lord Ashton, who explained carefully that I was to be referred to as under the king's protection in all official contexts, which apparently meant I had status somewhere between honored guest and something significantly more important. Something that made nobles bow nervously when they passed me in corridors. something that meant guards stood straighter when I walked by, something that terrified me because I didn't know how to hold that kind of power. Alexander himself was a constant, overwhelming presence in my new life. He had breakfast with me every single morning without fail, even on days when his schedule was packed with meetings and petitions. He would arrive at my rooms precisely at 8, already dressed for the day, and we would eat together while he asked about how I'd slept, what I'd read, what I wanted to do that day. He took me walking through the palace gardens every afternoon, showing me hidden paths and favorite spots, telling me the history of various plants and statues. He knew the name of every rose variety. He knew which fountain was oldest. He knew where his mother used to sit and read when she was alive. He sat with me in the library every evening, often reading silently while I tried to process my new reality, sometimes asking my opinion on matters of state that I had no business advising on, but that he seemed genuinely interested in my perspective on. He never pushed for anything physical, never demanded my time, never made me feel obligated, just was there, present, attentive, interested in everything I had to say, no matter how insignificant it seemed. We talked about everything during those walks and meals and quiet evenings. I told him about my childhood, about the small moments of kindness I'd received from servants who'd pitied me, about my mother, whom I'd never known but whose loss had defined my entire existence. He told me about the burden of kingship, about taking the throne at 19 when his father died in a hunting accident, about the overwhelming responsibility of making decisions that affected millions of lives. I told him about my love of botany, about secretly studying plant books I'd borrowed from the public library, about the small herb garden I tried to keep in a windowsill before my brothers destroyed it for amusement. He told me about his strategies for ruling, about balancing justice with mercy, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted things from him constantly. I told him about my fears, or about the panic attacks that still hit me at random moments, about the nightmares where I was back in my family's house being told I was worthless. He told me about his own nightmares, about the weight of the crown, about the constant fear of failing his people, about the isolation of having no one he could be truly honest with. He'd been king since he was 19, he told me, during one of our afternoon walks. We were sitting on a stone bench near the lily pond, watching koi fish drift through the water. His father's death had been sudden and violent, a riding accident during a royal hunt that everyone suspected wasn't actually an accident, but no one could prove was murder. He'd been thrust into power unprepared, surrounded by advisors who were twice his age and eager to manipulate a young king. He'd had to become hard quickly. I learned to trust no one, make decisions that sometimes cost lives but saved kingdoms, that he'd spent 16 years making those decisions, growing more isolated with each one, feeling increasingly disconnected from real human connection. "Everyone wants something from me," he said quietly. His eyes were distant, looking at something I couldn't see. "Every conversation is a negotiation. Every friendship is transactional. Every smile is calculated to curry favor or gain advantage. I haven't had a genuine interaction with anyone outside my inner circle in years. Even then, I'm not sure my advisors see me as a person rather than a position." "Is that why you claimed me?" I asked. "Because I wasn't calculating? Because I had nothing you needed?" "Partly." He turned to look at me then, his ice blue eyes focusing with an intensity that made my breath catch, but mostly because when I looked at you that night, standing there while your family destroyed you, I saw someone who understood what it's like to be alone in a crowd, someone who knows what it means to wear a mask to survive, someone who spent their entire life being told they're not enough, but who kept trying anyway. Someone real, someone who wasn't performing for me because you didn't even know I was watching. You were just genuine, honest, even in your pain, especially in your pain. "I don't feel real," I admitted, looking down at my hands, at the calluses that were starting to fade from years of manual labor my family had assigned me. "I feel like I'm waiting for this dream to end, waiting for you to realize you made a mistake, waiting for someone to tell me this was all a cruel joke. It's not a dream, Elliot." His hand found mine, fingers threading through mine with practiced ease like he'd been holding my hand for years instead of weeks. "This is real. You're here. You're safe. And as long as I'm king, as long as I have breath in my body and power in this kingdom, no one will hurt you again. That's a promise I intend to keep." The problem was, I was starting to believe him. Worse than that, I was starting to want this to be permanent, starting to look forward to breakfast with an eagerness that scared me, starting to crave those afternoon walks more than food or sleep, starting to fall asleep hoping Alexander would still be there in the morning, that I wouldn't wake up to find this had all been a fever dream brought on by desperation. It was terrifying, as I'd spent my entire life learning that wanting things only led to disappointment, that hoping for love or acceptance or belonging only set me up for more heartbreak, that dreaming of better futures only made the present more painful. But Alexander made it hard not to hope, made it impossible not to want. He looked at me like I mattered, like my words had value, like my presence was something he treasured rather than tolerated. He remembered small things I mentioned in passing. He noticed when I was tired or overwhelmed. He adjusted his schedule to accommodate my needs without being asked. He treated me like I was precious, like I was worth the time and effort he was investing. And slowly, terrifyingly, I started to believe that maybe I was. The first time I laughed in his presence, really laughed, was 3 weeks after the ball. When we were in the library late at night, both reading quietly, when he made a dry observation about a particularly pompous ambassador he'd had to deal with that day. The comment was so unexpected, so perfectly timed, so genuinely funny that I laughed before I could stop myself. A real laugh, not the careful chuckle I'd learned to produce on command. The sound startled both of us. Alexander looked up from his book with an expression of wonder. "Do that again," he said. "What?" "Laugh." He set his book aside completely. "I've never heard you laugh like that." It was beautiful. I didn't know how to respond to that, didn't know how to explain that I hadn't laughed freely in years, that my family had trained me to be quiet, to be invisible, to express nothing that might draw attention. That genuine joy was something I'd almost forgotten how to feel. He started making me laugh more after that. Small jokes, dry observations, stories from court that were absurd enough to be funny. He seemed to collect my laughter like other men collected gold, his expression lighting up every time he earned one. And slowly, I started to relax in his presence, started to let my guard down, started to believe that maybe he actually wanted me for who I was, not despite my flaws, but including them. 1 month after the ball, Alexander asked me to walk with him in the private royal gardens, a place I'd never been invited before. These gardens were off limits to everyone except the king and his closest family members, protected by guards and ancient magic wards that prevented unauthorized entry. He'd never brought me here in all our afternoon walks through the public gardens. The invitation felt significant. I waited. I followed him through a small gate hidden behind a hedge wall, through passages that twisted and turned until we emerged into a space that stole my breath. The private gardens were more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. Ancient trees with trunks as wide as carriages, perfectly manicured paths winding between flower beds that bloomed in impossible colors, a fountain carved from white marble depicting the first king and queen of the realm, water cascading over their joined hands, benches positioned strategically to catch the afternoon sun or evening shade. Everything was maintained with obvious care and love, a secret paradise hidden in the heart of the palace. "This was my mother's favorite place," Alexander said quietly. His voice held a gentleness I rarely heard. "She spent hours here every day when I was a child. And she taught me the name of every plant, every flower. She used to say that a king who couldn't appreciate beauty had no business ruling." I looked at him, seeing pain and loss written in the lines around his eyes. "I'm sorry you lost her. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. She was sick for a long time before she died." He led me to one of the benches, sat close beside me, took my hand like he'd been doing it forever. Cancer, they called it. The court physicians tried everything, but nothing worked. I watched her fade for 2 years. By the end, she was so weak she could barely speak. But she made me promise something before she died. "What?" "That I wouldn't let the crown make me cold. That I wouldn't let the responsibility of ruling turn me into someone who couldn't feel anymore." Oh, she said the worst thing that could happen to me wasn't failure or defeat or even death. The worst thing would be becoming so isolated that I forgot how to connect with people, how to love. He looked at me then, his ice blue eyes intense with emotion. "I've broken that promise for 16 years, Elliot. I let the crown make me exactly what she warned against. Cold, isolated, unable to trust anyone enough to let them close. Until you. We need to talk about what this is, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What we are to each other, what I want us to be. I felt my stomach drop, felt panic rising because I knew what was coming, and I didn't know if I was ready. Okay, I've been patient, I've given you space and time, I've let you adjust to being here without pushing for anything you're not ready to give. But Elliot, I need you to understand something fundamental about what happened that night in the ballroom. This isn't temporary for me. This isn't charity or kindness or political strategy. This is real. What? I couldn't breathe suddenly, couldn't process what he was saying. When I claimed you that night, when I said you were mine, I meant it in every possible way. He turned to face me fully, both hands holding mine now. You're mine, not as property or a possession, not as a rescued pet project, as my intended mate, as the Omega I want to bond with, as the person I want beside me for the rest of my life, as my future king consort, as my everything. The world tilted. Alexander, you're the king. You're the Omega I've been waiting for my entire adult life. He cut me off gently but firmly. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I know this is impossibly fast. I know you need time to trust that this is real and not some elaborate dream you're going to wake up from. But I need you to know where I stand. I need you to know that every moment we spend together, I'm falling more deeply in love with you. Every laugh I earn from you, every time you let your guard down with me, every morning you wake up still here, I fall harder. And I'm not going to stop falling, Elliot. I'm going to keep falling for you until the day I die. You can't love me, I whispered. The words came out broken. You barely know me. We've only spent a month together. How can you possibly know? I know you're kind even after 24 years of cruelty that would have made most people vicious. I know you're intelligent despite never being given proper education or encouragement. I know you're strong despite your family spending your entire life trying to break you. I know you try to make yourself small and invisible to avoid conflict, even though you deserve to take up space. I know you love wisteria because your mother planted them in the garden before you were born, and it's the only connection you have to her. I know you read botanical texts late at night because understanding how things grow gives you hope that maybe you can grow too. I know you have a small scar on your left wrist from when your brother pushed you into a fireplace when you were 8. I know you prefer tea to coffee. I know the face you make when you're trying not to cry. This face right now. I know you, Elliot. I've been watching you, learning you, memorizing everything about you, and I love what I know. The tears came then. Hot and unstoppable. I couldn't hold them back anymore. I'd spent weeks trying not to hope for exactly this, trying not to want it, trying not to imagine a future where the king actually wanted me permanently, trying not to let myself believe that someone like him could actually love someone like me. But hearing him say it, hearing the certainty in his voice, broke something open in my chest that I'd been keeping locked for my entire life. I want this, I choked out through the tears. I want you so much it terrifies me, but I'm so afraid. Tell me what you're afraid of. He pulled me against his chest, let me cry into his shirt. Tell me every fear so I can spend the rest of our lives proving they're unfounded, that I'll wake up and this will all be gone, that you'll realize I'm not worth the trouble. Is that my family was right about me being useless and damaged and fundamentally flawed, that I'll disappoint you, that I'll fail at being what you need, that loving me will be the worst decision you ever make as king. Stop. He pulled back just enough to cup my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. Your family was wrong about everything. Every cruel word they ever said was a lie designed to control you, to keep you small and manageable. You are worth everything to me, Elliot. You're worth my time, my attention, my protection, my love, my throne, if it came to that. And I'm going to prove that to you every single day for the rest of our lives if you'll let me. But you're the king. You could have anyone perfect and trained and ready to be what you need. I don't want perfect. His thumb wiped away my tears. No, I don't want trained. I don't want someone who knows how to play the game. I want you, messy and scared and still learning to believe you're worth loving. I want the Omega who survived 24 years in hell and came out the other side still capable of kindness. I want the one who makes me remember why I wanted to be king in the first place, to protect people like you, to make the kingdom safe for the ones who've been hurt. I want you, Elliot. Only you, always you. I couldn't speak, could only cry and let him hold me while everything I'd been holding back poured out. All the fear, all the doubt, all the desperate wanting I'd been trying to suppress. He held me through it all, stroking my hair, murmuring reassurances, letting me fall apart completely because he knew I needed to. When I finally calmed enough to breathe normally, I had my face buried against his chest and his heartbeat steady under my ear, he said quietly, "I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not asking you to love me yet, though I hope you will someday. I'm just asking you to try. Try to believe this is real. Try to trust that I mean what I say. Try to let yourself want this, want me, want a future where you're safe and loved and valued. Can you do that? Can you try?" I pulled back to look at him. His face was open, vulnerable, hopeful. The most powerful man in the kingdom looking at me like I had the power to make or break him with my answer. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, I'll try. I'll try to believe you. I'll try to trust this. I'll try to let myself want you, even though wanting things has only ever hurt me before. That's all I need." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. "Just try. The rest will come with time, I promise you." And he kissed me, actually kissed me for the first time, soft and gentle, like I was something precious that might break, like I was worth treasuring. When he pulled back, I was crying again, but for completely different reasons. "I think I'm already in love with you," I admitted in a whisper. "I think I started falling that night in the ballroom when you caught me. I just didn't want to admit it because I was so sure it couldn't be real." "Good," he said, kissing me again, "because I've been waiting very impatiently for you to catch up." 2 months after the ball, 2 months of growing closer and falling deeper, Alexander made his formal announcement to the kingdom. He'd warned me it was coming. As he had asked for my permission first, had made sure I was ready for the public attention it would bring. We talked about it for hours in the library one evening, Alexander explaining the political implications while I tried not to panic about becoming a public figure. The announcement came during the summer solstice celebration, the kingdom's biggest public holiday. Traditionally, the king gave a speech from the palace balcony, addressing the massive crowd that gathered in the square below. This year, Alexander insisted I stand beside him, visible, present, his intentions made clear before he even spoke the words. The crowd that day was enormous, thousands of people packed into the palace square and spilling into surrounding streets. I could hear them from inside the palace, their excited chatter, their celebration of the longest day of the year. Alexander took my hand as we walked toward the balcony, his grip firm and reassuring. "You don't have to say anything," he reminded me. "Just stand beside me, let them see you. Let them understand what you mean to me." I nodded, too nervous to speak. We stepped onto the balcony together. The crowd erupted in cheers when they saw their king. Then confusion rippled through them when they noticed me, an unknown Omega at the king's side. Alexander raised his hand for silence. The crowd settled immediately, that instant obedience that came from loving and respecting their ruler. "My people," Alexander's voice carried easily across the square, projected by the same magic that allowed kings to address large crowds. "As is tradition, I stand before you today to celebrate the summer solstice and reflect on the year past and the year to come. But this year, I have something more significant to share, something personal that will affect the future of this kingdom." He paused, his hand tightening on mine. "This year, I have found my bonded mate." The crowd gasped collectively. Whispers erupted. Alexander continued speaking over them. "I present to you Elliot, who has captured my heart completely. He will be formally bonded to me as my king consort. He will stand beside me in all things, and I expect every citizen of this kingdom to treat him with the respect and honor due to his position." The crowd was stunned into silence for a heartbeat. Then half of them erupted in cheers. Celebration, joy for their beloved king finding love. The other half looked shocked, scandalized, uncertain. Who was this Omega? Where did he come from? Why had no one heard of him before? Alexander had anticipated the questions. He addressed them directly. "Elliot is under my protection by royal decree. His past before coming to the palace is irrelevant. What matters is his future, our future, together. I ask for your support and your blessings as we move forward. Any who would harm him or speak ill of him will answer to me personally." The message was clear. Love me, love him, hurt him, answer to your king. The crowd seemed to understand. The cheering grew louder. People shouted blessings and congratulations. Someone started chanting, "Long live the king consort," and it spread through the crowd like wildfire. I stood there, overwhelmed, tears streaming down my face, while Alexander smiled and waved to his people. Afterward, safely back inside, I collapsed into a chair. That was terrifying. "You did beautifully." Alexander knelt in front of me, took my hands. "You stood there while I claimed you in front of the entire kingdom. You let them see you. That takes incredible courage, Elliot. I was crying the whole time. You were crying because you're overwhelmed, and that's completely reasonable." He kissed my hands. "But you didn't run. You didn't hide. You stood beside me. That's all I needed." The reaction from the nobility was more mixed than the public's response. Some noble families sent congratulations immediately, political animals recognizing which way the wind was blowing. Some sent carefully worded letters that were supportive without being too enthusiastic, hedging their bets. Some sent nothing at all, a pointed silence that spoke volumes. And some sent barely concealed insults disguised as concern. Was the king certain? Had he considered all options? Perhaps he was moving too quickly. Alexander responded to exactly none of them. He'd made his announcement. His decision was final. Those who supported it would be rewarded with his favor. Those who didn't would be ignored into political irrelevance. The power of being king was that he didn't actually need anyone's approval. Within a week, even the most resistant nobles had fallen in line, publicly congratulating us while privately seething. I attended state functions at Alexander's side after that, learning to navigate court politics, learning to smile through thinly veiled insults, learning to carry myself like someone who belonged there. It was exhausting, but Alexander was always there, a steadying presence, ready to cut down anyone who crossed a line. The court learned quickly that the fastest way to enrage their king was to insult his intended mate. The bonding ceremony happened 3 months after the ball, on the first day of autumn when the leaves were just starting to turn gold and crimson. Private and intimate, just Alexander's closest advisors, and a few people I'd become genuinely close to in the palace. Dr. Laurent was there to monitor my physical response to the bond. Lord Ashton stood as primary witness. Edmund, the head steward, attended because he'd become something like a father figure to me in the months since the ball. And Alexander's younger sister, Princess Catherine, was there, having arrived from her estate specifically for the ceremony. She'd pulled me aside the day before and told me she'd never seen her brother, happy before I arrived, that she approved wholeheartedly, and that if I ever hurt him, she'd make my life very difficult. I'd laughed, both terrified and touched by her fierce protectiveness. The ceremony itself was held in the private chapel attached to the royal family's quarters, a small stone room with stained glass windows depicting the history of the kingdom. Candles burned in silver holders. The air smelled of incense and old stone in anticipation. I wore formal bonding whites, soft fabric that felt like water against my skin. Alexander wore traditional royal bonding attire, deep blue embroidered with gold thread and patterns that represented eternal commitment. As we stood facing each other, while the royal priest recited ancient words in a language most people no longer understood, words about souls joining and lives intertwining in promises that transcended death. My hands were shaking. Alexander held them steady, his thumbs rubbing reassuring circles against my palms. "Do you, Elliot, formerly of House Ashford, accept this alpha as your bonded mate? Do you offer your trust, your heart, your life to him? Do you understand that this bond is permanent, unbreakable by any force but death itself?" "I do," I said. My voice was stronger than I expected. "I offer everything I am and everything I'll become. Do you, Alexander, king of this realm, accept this Omega as your bonded mate? Do you offer your protection, your devotion, your life to him? Do you understand that this bond supersedes all other obligations, including those to crown and country?" "I do," Alexander said. His voice held absolute certainty. "I offer everything I am and everything I have. Then, by the authority of the gods and the crown, I pronounce you bonded. May your lives be long, your love be strong, and your union bring peace to this kingdom." Alexander marked my neck first, his teeth sinking into the sensitive bonding gland with the practiced precision. The pain was sharp and immediate, but it transformed almost instantly into something else. Heat, connection, the bond snapping into place like lightning striking. Suddenly I could feel him, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. His love for me pouring through the new connection like water through a broken dam. His determination to protect me. His joy at finally having me as his permanently. His relief that I'd said yes. His certainty that this was right, forever right, eternally right. His alpha claiming settling over me like a warm blanket, making my omega instincts purr with satisfaction. Safe, wanted, home. I marked him back with shaking hands, my smaller teeth finding the corresponding spot on his neck, claiming the king as mine just as surely as he'd claimed me. Feeling his alpha strength through the bond, feeling his responsibilities and burdens, feeling the weight of the crown he carried every day, feeling how much lighter that weight became when he was with me. The bond settled between us like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering, like finding the other half of myself I hadn't known was missing. When we pulled apart, both breathing hard, both marked permanently, Dr. Laurent checked us both quickly and declared the bond strong and stable. Lord Ashton congratulated us formally. Catherine hugged me hard enough to crack ribs and whispered welcome to the family in my ear. Edmund had tears in his eyes when he bowed to us both, and Alexander looked at me like I'd just given him the world. 1 year after the ball, I stood in the same ballroom where my family had publicly disowned me. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone, especially on me. This time I stood beside Alexander's throne, not cowering by a marble pillar. This time I wore royal colors, deep blue and gold, tailored perfectly to my frame. This time I had Alexander's bonding mark visible on my neck, proclaiming to everyone exactly who I belonged to and who belonged to me. At this time, when I entered the ballroom, every single person bowed, not out of fear necessarily, though some did fear me, out of respect for my position as king consort, out of political necessity, out of recognition that I was untouchable now, protected by the most powerful alpha in the kingdom, bonded permanently to the crown itself. The spring ball had become an annual celebration, and this year it held special significance. It was exactly 1 year since the night that had changed everything. Alexander had insisted on hosting it again, partly out of tradition, but mostly, I suspected, to make a point, to show the kingdom exactly how far I'd come, to demonstrate what happened when someone chose to protect rather than discard. The ballroom was packed with nobles from every corner of the kingdom. The same people who'd watched my family destroy me were now bowing and scraping, trying to curry favor, pretending they'd never witnessed my humiliation. I recognized several faces from that night, nobles who'd laughed when Marcus mocked me, who'd whispered when my father disowned me, who'd looked away when I'd nearly collapsed. Now they smiled and complimented my appearance and told me how fortunate the king was to have found me. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. My former family wasn't in attendance. They'd been banned from all court functions indefinitely by royal decree. But I'd learned through the Lord Ashton's intelligence network that they'd tried repeatedly to regain access, to apologize, to explain that they'd been under stress, that they hadn't meant it. That family was family, and surely I could forgive them now that I was in such an elevated position. They'd sent letters that I'd burned without reading. They'd sent gifts that I'd returned unopened. They'd even tried to approach me once when I was out riding through the city, only to be intercepted by the royal guard before they could get within 50 feet. Apparently my father had realized too late that having his disowned son become king consort might have been politically advantageous, that the connections to the crown he could have had through me would have elevated the Ashford family beyond their wildest dreams. But he'd thrown that opportunity away in a moment of cruelty, and Alexander had made it very clear there would be no second chances. The most recent attempt had been 2 weeks ago. A formal petition delivered to the palace requesting a private audience with me. No mention of Alexander, just me specifically. The petition had been beautifully written, clearly drafted by an expensive lawyer. It apologized profusely for past misunderstandings. It explained that emotions had run high the night of the ball. It suggested that perhaps, given my new position, we could discuss reconciliation for the good of the family name. It offered to accept me back fully as an Ashford, to restore my inheritance, to welcome me home. Alexander had read the petition, looked at me, and asked what I wanted to do with it. I'd thought about it for longer than I expected to. Thought about the 24 years of cruelty and neglect. Thought about the public humiliation. I thought about standing in that ballroom waiting to fall while my own family walked away. Thought about the moment they'd decided I was worthless and discarded me like garbage. Then I thought about who I'd been that night, scared and desperate and convinced I deserved everything they'd done to me. And I thought about who I was now, bonded to the king, living in the palace, safe and wanted and loved, the Omega who'd learned his own worth. I don't want to see them, I'd told Alexander. I don't want their apology. I don't want their acceptance or their family name or anything they could possibly offer me. They had me for 24 years and they chose to hurt me. They don't get to change their minds now that it's convenient. Alexander had smiled, proud and fierce. Good answer, he'd said. Then he'd had Lord Ashton draft a formal response. And it was 3 sentences long. Petition denied. Elliot bears the royal name now. The Ashfords have no claim to him and no standing to request his time. That response was delivered publicly, ensuring every noble in the kingdom knew exactly where things stood. Now, standing in the ballroom beside Alexander's throne while the nobles celebrated and danced and pretended the previous year had never happened, I felt the bond pulse with warmth through our connection, felt Alexander's love and pride and satisfaction. He was deliberately holding this ball in the same location at the same time of year to create a stark contrast, to show everyone what happened when you discarded someone who deserved protection, to demonstrate that the Omega nobody wanted had become the person everyone now wanted to know. You're thinking too loud, Alexander murmured. His voice pitched so only I could hear it beneath the music. I can feel your emotions through the bond. They're very loud right now. I'm thinking about how different everything is, I admitted. How a year ago I was standing by that pillar over there. I pointed across the room, waiting to fall apart, waiting for my life to end, and now I'm here, with you, safe. How did that happen? I caught you, he said simply, and I refused to let you fall. It's that simple. The rest was just details. I looked at him, at his strong profile, at the crown that sat so naturally on his head, at the man who'd crossed an entire ballroom to save me, who'd claimed me in front of everyone, who'd spent a year proving every day that he'd meant it. I love you, I said, not for the first time, but it still felt momentous every time I said it. I know, he replied, smiling that private smile that was mine alone. I can feel it through the bond, but I like hearing you say it anyway. Say it again. I love you, I repeated. Then again, because he was still smiling. I love you. Once more because I could. I love you, Alexander. King, Alpha, mine. Good. He took my hand, raised it to his lips, kissed my knuckles while the entire ballroom watched. Because I love you too, and I'm going to spend the rest of our lives making sure you never forget it. The music swelled. Alexander stood, offered his hand formally. Dance with me? Always. We walked onto the dance floor together. The crowd parted for us automatically. The orchestra shifted into a waltz. Alexander pulled me close, one hand at my waist, the other holding mine. We began to move in perfect synchronization, and the bond allowing us to anticipate each other's movements effortlessly. Around us, other couples joined the dance, but I only saw Alexander, only felt the bond between us, only heard the steady rhythm of his heart through our connection. The Omega nobody wanted had become the person the king couldn't live without. The Omega his family had thrown away had become untouchable, protected by the crown and bonded to its bearer, and the king who'd claimed me before I could fall had never let me fall since. That was the truth of it, simple and profound. Alexander had caught me, had refused to let go, had fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, had given me time to heal and space to grow, and patience to believe I was worth loving. And now, dancing in the same ballroom where I'd been destroyed and remade, I finally understood. I had never been worthless. I had just been surrounded by people too blind to see my value. But Alexander had seen it, had recognized it immediately, had claimed it without hesitation, had spent a year proving it every single day. The song ended. The ballroom applauded. Alexander kissed me in front of everyone, claiming me publicly one more time, making sure every person in the room understood exactly where things stood. And when we pulled apart, when I looked into his ice blue eyes and felt his absolute love through our bond, I finally, completely believed I was worth it, worth loving, worth fighting for, worth keeping. The Omega nobody wanted had learned he was wanted by the one person who mattered most. And that was enough. That was everything. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what you thought of Elliot and Alexander's journey. Until next time, may you all find someone who catches you before you fall.